Coming up on Diplomatic Channel, U.S. President Donald Trump accepts that presidency transition to Joe Biden must begin. Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon says an independence referendum should take place next year. Sudan battles a huge refugee crisis as 40,000 Ethiopians flee fighting in Tigray region. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. U.S. President Donald Trump has accepted that a formal transition should begin for President-elect Joe Biden to take office. The president says the federal agency overseeing the handover must do what needs to be done, even as he vowed to keep contesting his election defeat.
And it is now my great honor to introduce the President-elect of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
U.S. President-elect Joe Biden on Monday was formally given the go-ahead by a federal agency to begin his transition to the presidency shortly after the battleground state of Michigan certified him as the winner there. The U.S. General Services Administration, an independent agency, informed Mr. Biden that his transition leading up to January 20th swearing-in could officially begin. In a tweet, President Trump wrote that GSA Administrator Emily Murphy and her team should do what needs to be done with regard to initial protocols and have told my team to do the same. The move by the GSA means Mr. Biden's team will now have federal funds and an official office to conduct his transition over the next 2 months. It also paves the way for Mr. Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris to receive regular national security briefings that President Trump also gets. Meanwhile, the president-elect on Monday also named the key members of his foreign policy team. Antony Blinken is the next U.S. Secretary of State. Jake Sullivan is National Security Advisor, and Linda Thomas-Greenfield is the U.S. Ambassador to the UN. Biden, a Democrat, also chose Alejandro Mayorkas to head the Department of Homeland Security.
As Secretary for Homeland Security, I nominate Alejandro Mayorkas. This is one of the hardest jobs in government. After years of chaos, dysfunction, and absolute cruelty at DHS, I'm proud to nominate an experienced leader who has been hailed by both Democrats and Republicans. Given its critical role in immigration matters, I'm proud that for the first time ever, the department will be led by an immigrant, a Latino, who knows that we are a nation of laws and values.
And former Senator and one-time Democratic presidential nominee John Kerry to be a special presidential envoy for the climate.
If I had a former Secretary of State who helped negotiate the Paris Climate Accord, or a former presidential nominee, or a former leading senator, or the head of a major climate organization for the job, they would show my commitment to the United States and the whole world. The fact that I picked the one person who is all of these things speaks unambiguously to my commitment. The world will know that with one of my closest friends, John Kerry, he's speaking for America on one of the most pressing threats of our time.
The president-elect also picked Avril Haines to be Director of National Intelligence. She was Deputy National Security Advisor under President Barack Obama and previously the first woman to serve as CIA Deputy Director.
As Director of National Intelligence.
Amidst all these, President Donald Trump seems to soften his tone of not conceding defeat, though he remains defiant that the election was rigged against him.
It's going to be a very hard thing to concede because we know there was massive fraud. So as to whether or not I can get this apparatus moving this quickly, because time isn't on our side, everything else is on our side, facts are on our side. This was a massive fraud. This should never take place in this country. We're like a third world country.
The Electoral College will meet to formalize the results on December 14th, with Mr. Joe Biden due to be sworn in as president on January 20, 2021.
Our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Maria Bird, spoke with the President and CEO, Corporate Council on Africa, Florizel Liza, on what impact the Biden cabinet will have on U.S.-Africa relations. Take a look.
President Lassier, thank you so much for joining us. As the Corporate Council on Africa has been one of those strong leaders with Africa-U.S. relations for quite some time, tell us what the new administration and transition team is doing. You know, we see now that the UN ambassador will be a former ambassador to several countries in Africa. And so we're so excited to hear that Linda Thomas Greenfield will be joining the Biden administration. Tell us what this means.
Oh, yeah. So that is an incredible story, which I think reflects not only the competence and the experience and the expertise that will be brought to bear by having the kinds of people that President-elect Biden has selected as his Secretary of State, the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, the kinds of people that he has chosen thus far for his foreign policy team really reflects, I think, a different approach than the one that's been taken in the current administration. They did it their way, but I think that President-elect Biden will do it the way that he has seen done before, not just under the Obama administration, but even before that, that you're turning to people who are not just your political supporters and allies, but people who have extensive experience in the areas for which you are giving them responsibility.
President Lassier, you mentioned diversity. What do you believe the Biden administration is actually saying and they're doing relative to diversity issues? And how is this choosing Linda Thomas Greenfield really showing their place in the area of understanding diversity and putting a good effort toward addressing diversity in the U.S.?
Well, let me just say that, as a start to this conversation, I think there are people, including President-elect Joe Biden, who have had, a real appreciation for diversity. But the country is also at a new point where in the post-George Floyd effort and the way that the American public came out, people of every race, color, age, they're young people, old people, we have never seen such a widespread support for people literally in the streets, supporting the need for justice, racial justice, social justice, economic justice here in the U.S. So notwithstanding what anyone in the past has done or any views that people in the new Biden administration have had all along, this is like a moment of truth for the U.S. And the Biden administration is coming in just at a point when you can lead the U.S. To be, one that is more diverse, not just in words, but in action. And I believe it's, an incredible opportunity for the Biden administration, and that I have every confidence that they will, in fact, bring the country together on this particular point. There won't be divisiveness. I think the marches out there showed that there was no sort of us and them approach to this.
There were three main key points or issues that you would like to see the Biden administration focus on as it relates to U.S.-Africa relations. What would be those three top areas?
First off would be a signal that Africa is an important geopolitical partner of the United States, an important partner for our businesses. Many of our businesses have a stake in Africa. If you're a global company and you're not invested in and operating in Africa, you won't make it. Africa is the future. I would like to see the Biden administration continue important programs that support U.S.-Africa trade and investment. they're free to call it whatever they want. This administration called it Prosper Africa. I'm less tied to the name than to the substance and the policies that are in place. And then the third thing that I would say that I think is a really opportune way to bring together social and economic justice in the U.S. with our global desire for social and economic justice in Africa and other parts of the world is to have a program or programs that link the African diaspora in the United States, people like me, people like Linda Thomas Greenfield, but people, who Ethiopian Americans, Nigerian Americans, all the different people who are here from the diaspora with people on the continent to promote greater business opportunities and partnerships between small women-owned, African American, minority-owned, diaspora-owned businesses here who have a special link in certain ways to Africa, to the small businesses on the continent, youth-owned, women-owned businesses, and do something that really supports those.
President Lassere, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We gain so much insight into actually what's happening with U.S.-Africa relations, and we look forward to talking to you again as we see the growth and the development and the further work between the Biden administration and organizations like yours. So thank you so much.
Away from the United States, Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon says an independence referendum that could wrench apart the United Kingdom after Brexit should take place in the earlier part of the devolved Parliament's next term, which begins in 2021.
Pro-independence Scottish National Party leader Nicola Sturgeon says she anticipates that a vote will take place in the earlier part of the next Scottish Parliament, which begins next year.
I think the referendum, for a whole variety of reasons, should be in the earlier part of the next Parliament. I'm not going to sit here right now. I intend to say more about this before the election in our manifesto, but we are still in a global pandemic that I feel a bit more hopeful about seeing the end of than I did even just a couple of months ago, but there's still a lot of uncertainty ahead. And, I'm a lifelong believer in, campaigner for, advocate for independence.
Scots voted 55 to 45% against independence in a 2014 referendum, but both Brexit and the British government's handling of the COVID-19 crisis have bolstered support for independence among Scots. However, the British government says that the 2014 independence referendum was decisive and a once-in-a-generation event, so it should be respected.
Can you advance a little bit for the light? Just some slope.
In the meantime, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says that the UK will not ask for more time to negotiate a post-Brexit trade deal with the European Union, despite significant differences remaining between the two parties. Britain and the EU are trying to agree terms to keep annual bilateral trade worth nearly $1 trillion free of tariffs and quotas from 2021, when a standstill transition period ends following Britain's departure from the European Union.
Of course, we're not going to extend the transition period, but we want to make practical arrangements to help businesses in Northern Ireland, and we've agreed, for instance, a one-year adjustment period so there's no disruption to the flow of medicines. And we've already launched a 200 million trader support service to help agri-food businesses and others, and that's going to, more details will be announced shortly, Mr. Speaker.
While addressing the House of Commons for Prime Minister's questions via web link, Mr. Johnson also says his government is taking tough decisions now to try to make the economy bounce back from the damage done by COVID-19.
Important facts about the coronavirus package, the £200 billion package of support that the Chancellor has devised for lives and livelihoods across the country, is that the benefits for overwhelmingly prioritise the poorest and neediest in the country. And the reason we can do that It's because we have a government that understands.
His statements came as the UK's Office for Budgetary Responsibility announced that the UK's economy is set to shrink by 11.3% by the end of 2020, its biggest contraction since the early 1700s.
Still to come on the program. 13 Special Forces soldiers in Australia face dismissal in relation to a report on alleged unlawful killings in Afghanistan. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Amid warnings of war crimes by the United Nations, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has declared the launch of the final phase of the army's operation in the northern region of Tigray. He said the military would try not to harm civilians in the regional capital Mekelle, but thousands of Ethiopians have already fled into neighboring Sudan.
The UN Refugee Agency UNHCR says the number of people fleeing fighting in Ethiopia's Tigray region for Sudan has reached 40,000. UNHCR workers at Hamdayet border crossing in Sudan's Kassala state say they are registering thousands of new arrivals every day. Beyond the usual challenges of feeding and housing such large groups of people, the COVID-19 pandemic means the organization must also supply masks for those taking the 15-hour bus journey to be relocated at Rakuba camp in Sudan's Garadef state. Ethiopian refugee Philemon says those who fled the fighting never expected to be refugees, but now feel safe to be out of Tigray.
If we were in our city, it would be very dangerously. So right now here, at least we are safe. At least we are safe. We didn't hear any kind of explosion. We didn't hear any kind of weapons. We are here very safe, actually. But actually, there's a lot of challenge right here because when we trying to escape, we didn't take any kind of luggage or baggage. We just only escaped, and we have no any kind of blanket and something carpet because we are just only scared and trying to escape to Sudani, to Hamdayet.
There is little verifiable information on the conflict in northern Ethiopia, with both the government and Tigray People's Liberation Front (TPLF) claiming recent advances. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government said enemy soldiers are surrendering as it advanced towards the regional capital Mekelle, but the Tigrayans reported they were resisting and had destroyed a prestigious army division. Since fighting began on November 4th, hundreds of people have died and there has been widespread destruction of homes. Mr. Abiy, who won the Nobel Peace Prize last year for ending a standoff with Eritrea, has said he will not negotiate with the TPLF, though he received African Union envoys in Addis Ababa.
Their objective was clear: to make the country ungovernable by instigating clashes along ethnic and religious lines.
Let's get more on this story from the VOA's Simon Marks in Ethiopia. Simon, give us an update on what's happening in Tigray.
Well, so it's tough getting, extremely solid information out of Tigray region due to the lack of communications. But there are reports coming out from, various aid organizations on the ground and diplomats who are briefed, who still say that until at least this morning anyway, Mekelle seemed calm. There was no violence in the city, and that federal forces were still fighting on 3 fronts: to the north, the west, and the south, roughly sort of 40 to 60 kilometers away. As far as I've been briefed, that was the situation today. But clearly, there's a huge degree of uncertainty. Those reports, although coming from people who have some access through satellite phones and what have you, it's still fairly secondhand. So until the region opens up and journalists and independent observers and aid organizations get access, we're not really going to know the full extent. Obviously, there are rumors coming through of very high casualties, and the number of IDPs, internally displaced people in schools and university, well into the hundreds of thousands. So pretty dire situation with fighting ongoing.
With information slowly trickling out, it's, difficult to get information at the moment. But we have heard that Tigray authorities have appointed a representative that will help discuss with the AU and other international bodies concerning the cessation of hostilities. Where do they hope to meet, being that the AU is headquartered in Addis Ababa?
This is the Tigray authorities you're referring to?
Simon, if you can hear me, I was referring to the Tigrayan authorities.
Right, yes. They did come out with a statement saying that they want to engage, obviously, with AU and various international parties. I mean, what they're hoping to achieve there, certain analysts have sort of hypothesized, is this them stepping back, admitting some sort of defeat? Others have said they want to come across looking as sort of good cops in all of this, saying the right things at a time when obviously the Ethiopian Prime Minister is still on the offensive. Nobody quite knows what the political sort of ambition is behind this this call to sort of negotiate and come across as appearing as a mediator. That, I think, we'll have to see. For sure, the Tigray officials are, they're locked up there in the Tigray region and communicating through satellite connection, internet, etc.
We understand that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed met with some AU envoys in Addis Ababa. Tell us of the outcome of that meeting.
To, essentially convince the Prime Minister of Ethiopia to step back, to engage in talks, to start a mediation process. Obviously, they were met with very little ability to maneuver when they met with the Prime Minister today. The Prime Minister's office came out with a statement, thanking them for their presence, but essentially telling them that what they had to do was a law enforcement project that was ongoing and that had to be finished. So essentially, the AU are politely being told, thank you, but see you later. I've been speaking to AU officials here who sort of bemoan, the lack of accountability in the region. Some people have said, that the ECOWAS region, when Mali had its coup, for example, recently, put sanctions on Mali until they came forward and held elections. Whereas here, we've seen very little action from, IGAD and such organisms. So I think, there's a sense of disappointment. The next opportunity to convince Abiy will come on December the 5th. There's a leaders summit where heads of states will meet virtually, and Ethiopia, I know, is high on the agenda because the topic is silencing the guns.
The VOA's Simon Marks, thank you so much for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. Finally, on the program, Australia has notified 13 Special Forces soldiers that they face dismissal in relation to a report on alleged unlawful killings in Afghanistan. An independent report published this month says there is evidence that 39 unharmed Afghan prisoners and civilians were killed by 19 Australian soldiers.
At this time, 13 individuals have been issued administrative action notices in relation to the Afghanistan inquiry. At this point in time, no individuals have been separated from the Australian Defence Force. Administrative action includes receiving a notice proposing to terminate the individual's service. The individual then has the opportunity to respond within a minimum of 14 days. we are all holding ourselves to account as an organisation, and we'll work through this.
And that's Diplomatic Channel this week, but do remember to send your questions, comments and suggestions to any of the addresses showing on your screen. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale.